Lavender Literary Society members and guests, good evening, and welcome to a special World Pride edition of the American LGBTQ Museum's book club in partnership with our friends at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Today, we are honored to present Jon Key's 2024 book, Black, Queer, and Untold, a new archive of designers, artists, and trailblazers. A visually rich and deeply personal blend of memoir and history that honors underrecognized visionaries from the 19th century to today. Jon will be in conversation with my dear friend, Kimberly Drew, curator and author of This Is What I Know About Art. My name is Suhaili Bautista Carolina, and I am the Chief of Programs at the American LGBTQ Museum, a new collaboration dedicated to preserving, researching, and sharing LGBTQ history and culture that will open its first physical galleries in New York City in 2027. I am a brown-skinned Black woman. I'm wearing red lipstick with gold earrings and gold glasses. I'm wearing all black, and I'm seated in front of a window with New York City skyscrapers behind me. While our first physical galleries are still 2 years into the future, our work as a museum is already underway. Over the past 2 years, we have produced a robust slate of free public programming with partners across the country. We've toured an award-winning exhibition to 5 major US cities, and we've launched our Lavender Literary Society book club, which you get to experience this evening. You can learn more about the American LGBTQ Museum at americanlgbtqmuseum.org. I'd now like to introduce our collaborator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Gloria Kenyon.
Thank you so much, Suhaili. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Gloria Kenyon, and I am the head of public programs at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. I am a white woman with dark hair and bangs. I am wearing black-rimmed glasses, a purple lipstick, and a white blouse with black polka dots. And behind me on my green screen is the Kogod courtyard of the Smithsonian American Art Museum. SAM, Smithsonian American Art Museum, is a place to picture yourself in American art. As the global leader and trusted source on American art and craft, we engage our community, the nation, and the world by exploring tradition and innovation while showcasing the bold and unexpected. We celebrate a wide range of artistic expressions, reminding us all that we are makers. Thank you to the American LGBTQ Museum for allowing us to join this special edition of the Lavender Literary Society to celebrate World Pride in DC, the home of SAM, this year.
For those of you joining the Lavender Literary Society for the first time today, we'd like to begin by sharing a bit about our book club. The American LGBTQ Museum Book Club is a space for community and connection, bridging generations through the magic of storytelling. Our titles are a mix of popular queer history and memoir with inspiring authors and iconic guest facilitators. Through virtual and in-person gatherings, we aim to ignite intergenerational dialogue and foster understanding, empathy, and unity. Together, we traverse the landscapes of queer culture, savoring the nuances and complexities that make our stories uniquely ours. This isn't just a book club, it's a movement. Reading together becomes a powerful act of empowerment, a catalyst for change, and a testament to the resilience of the LGBTQ spirit. Participants will be part of something extraordinary, and in this book club, we won't just read, we'll weave the threads of our stories into a tapestry of strength, resilience, and pride.
Now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's author, Jon Key. Jon Key is an artist, designer, and writer originally from Seal, Alabama. After receiving his BFA from RISD, Jon began his design career at Gray Advertising in NYC before moving on to work with HBO, Nickelodeon, and the Public Theater. Now he is co-founder of the Brooklyn-based design studio Morcos Key with Wild Morcos. As an educator, Jon has taught at MICA, Parsons, and currently teaches at Cooper Union and SVA. Jon is also a co-founder and design director of Codify Art, a multidisciplinary collective dedicated to creating, producing, supporting, and showcasing work by artists of color, particularly women, queer, and trans artists of color. Jon was selected for Forbes 30 Under 30 Art and Style list for 2020 and was the Frank Staton Chair in Graphic Design at Cooper Union 2018 to 2019. His work has been featured in Jeffrey Deitch Gallery, NYC, The Armory Show, The New York Times, and The Atlantic. Jon holds an MA in Design Research, Writing, and Criticism from SVA. His writing has been featured in publications such as The Washington Post, The Black Experience in Design, and AIGA. You can see more about him at morcoskey.com or on Instagram at jkey13.
And we're so happy to welcome our host, Kimberly Drew. Kimberly Drew is a writer, curator, and activist. Drew received her BA from Smith College in Art History and African American Studies. Drew's writing has appeared in publications including Vogue and The Cut. She is the author of This Is What I Know About Art, as well as the co-editor for Black Futures, which was designed by Jon and his partner, YL Studio, Marcos Key. Without further ado, we welcome Jon and Kimberly.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Haley and Gloria and Sam and Kimberly and everyone for being here to hear us talk about my new book, Black, Queer, and Untold. How you doing, Kimberly? Yes.
So heavy.
It's so heavy. It's so
So
thick with
much
knowledge.
girth. Yes. Bursting with information. Jon, do you want to kick us off with an excerpt? I can begin singing
Yeah.
my praises, but I will wait until it's my turn to speak. I think being able to ground with some context from your own words would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited. So I'm going to be reading from the last chapter in the book called The Response, which I think is a great place to start in terms of, summarizing what this project is about and kind of the motivations for me doing this work. So I'm going to read a few paragraphs. I haven't worked in a while. The call for me to do this project echoed from the silence of not hearing stories of Black or Black and queer histories in school or queer representation in any facets of my early life. This book is my attempt to cull together the voices hushed through time into a collective uproar. Now reverberating back to me are names, pictures, faces, stories, language, and text. My body trembles from this wave. To be honest, every object surface and every conversation held to create this book surprised and fascinated me. I guess I was shocked that I was actually able to find examples. Erasure can make you feel that you don't exist in certain contexts, especially in the design and art world. The canon is exclusionary and has always made me feel like I would never be included because we haven't been included. I realized, though, through this process that we, of course, have actually contributed more than can ever be known. This book binds together histories intensely intertwined. Each person and object curls and grows around seeds planted decades, even centuries before. This is a collection enabled and sustained by itself. This book is a testament that there is no singular depiction of Blackness or Black queerness. There is not one monolithic expression of who we are and how we exist in history. These visual forms represent how our stories shapeshift through time, morphing and forming into the codes decipherable by those looking in the shadows for light. Each of these individuals all have nuanced lives and tales to share. From Mary and William to Langston, Richard, Allen, and Kari, they prioritize their desires and needs to see more accurate truths of Black queer American life in the world. These artists and writers were not afraid to share their lives and souls with us in hopes of connecting with others out there, now or in some future day. This research project was self-motivated and made selfishly in a way. I did this for myself originally to even see what was possible. I was told often it would be too difficult to find anything, that I shouldn't be surprised if much didn't come up, that there is no Black there is no history of Black queer designers and artists, that what little there is has been lost or misplaced through time. I started to believe this myself when I first began, but research requires patience and hope. Last paragraph. This process was a labor of love, as they say. Unearthing histories is labor, but as we till the past for rock beds of memories or treasures intentionally hidden, we strengthen ourselves. Our tools are sharpened and the work becomes easier, and the fruits and rewards can be unimaginable. I have received so much more love back.
Thank you. I also realized that we skipped the opportunity to give visual descriptions of ourselves. So I just want to invite you to do that.
Yes, I'm Jon. I am a Black male. I have blonde hair. I'm wearing Black frame glasses. I'm wearing a gray shirt jacket that has patterns and geometric shapes on it. And behind me, I have posters on the wall in my studio space.
Thank you. My name is Kimberly. Thank you, Suhaili, for the introduction, and thank you to the host institutions for tonight for making space for conversation about this incredible book. I'm Kimberly. My description for today is I am a Black queer woman. I'm wearing some circular rimmed glasses today because that's what I like to do when I don't want to wear makeup. I'm brown skinned. I'm wearing pigtails with blonde braids and darker colored crew neck. I love where you started with the conversation, because I think that it was there are two kind of key themes that I think tie both of our work to start there. We're both very obsessive types and both very what's the word? Like, don't tell us we can't, because we will. Like, determined, but like in the cute way, like
Yeah.
very, very invested in being like, oh, so you think. Like, even for how we met, I worked on a book with Jay Wortham from 2015 to roughly 2020, called Black Futures. And when we thought to make Black Futures, which became an anthology of Black creative voices in the age of the internet, we had this conversation with our publishers. And like in the first meeting, we knew we were going to be having a conversation about the design of the book. It was like, in my mind, it just had to be the way. And it's quite interesting spending time with your book, because it just helps me understand how right I was. Because design is how we are remembered. And so anyway, we're in the conversation with some of the team, and they were like, well, we'll be lucky to find an art director who's Black, but we absolutely won't be able to find Black book designers. And one of the first things that Jay and I did was assemble a list of like nearly 20 Black designers who could make a book, at a commercial scale, who could work in collaboration with the team. And that's just the people who could do it and have lived experience doing it, professional experience doing it. That's not even saying the people that like absolutely deserve a shot. And so it was such a deep pleasure to work over those many years together to create our book. And so it's even better to encounter this wonderful tome. It's heavy, it's thick, and it's so resplendent with information. And so my comment question first for you is just to talk about how obsession landed you here, and how you might be able to speak to obsession as this kind of like narrative arc for how you're pulling this project together.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, the other thing that kind of ties us together is just our love for community. I think we love bringing people together. I think we love celebrating our community and in various different shapes and forms. And I think Black Futures is really pivotal, because I think for me, it was like, we had done at that point a couple of editorial projects. We had done some book projects, but this was certainly like the biggest book project that we had ever done. And I think was a really big inspiration for everyone, because it's like, wow, we can document our stories in this way. There is a contemporary archive of makers and artists and designers and writers and thinkers, or whoever, chefs, whoever, that deserve to be acknowledged in this kind of contemporary moment. And of course, in a similar way, like archiving it for the future. But obsession, I think, is a key way that you can get things done. I think for me, like as a young kid, like doing arts and crafts at my mom's kitchen table, like starting to be obsessed with art, just understanding that from piano lessons to trumpet to theater camp to church pageants to all of these different things. Like I loved creativity. I loved performing. I loved art and really understanding like there's so many different ways that you can use art to express your stories and express who you are. So I think just one, being like obsessed with passion, being passionate about art, but also I think in this process, like when I was starting to enter the art world and going to art school and thinking, wow, I'm gonna find this community of like Black queer people of color that are gonna celebrate me. I'm gonna learn all these amazing names, and realizing that that didn't happen for me. And I think then it became being obsessed with, why didn't this happen? Who are these names? Who are these people? And like I kind of read earlier, like, I really did this for myself. Like, of course, as an educator, of course, as a person that wants to create, share other people's stories is like a center of that. But really, I started this out because I didn't know anything. I didn't know who the Black queer ancestors were. I didn't know the Black designers who were working in the 1920s. I think there were key things that, were able to kind of ground me, like the North Star newspapers and like these abolitionist newspapers that we all kind of maybe heard about during Black History Month. And of course, we knew about like the Black Panther newspaper, but that was really it. So I think I just really was just wanting to find out more, and starting with as early as I could find, which at that moment was the Fire magazine in 1920s, and discovering this kind of close-knit group of amazing artists coming together to produce this radical, source of art and content was incredible. But then I was like, there has to be something before this. So I think it's just always like pushing and trying to carve out and trying to find and trying to leave as many stones uncovered as possible.
I mean, I think that that's the most incredible tribute that we can do as part of our generation. It's like such a love language that we share. So it's awesome to hear and to have read your words contextualizing this, because I don't think it can go understated, especially in this political climate, how not only is it important for us to remember or to make connections and bridges to the past, but also to have a deep reverence for the act of remembering. Like,
literally,
what your book starts with as a launching point is an understanding, okay, these books are existing in this time period. We understand the Harlem Renaissance, I think, kind of globally as a moment that happened in Black history, specifically Black queer history, but the audacity to ask, like, what happened before that? Because
right.
of course we've existed before that. We've existed in all these ways, you go back through all of these different continuums of history. Of course, there's always things to be mined. And what your book does really beautifully in the beginning chapters is fuse the connection between this revolution in storytelling and lithography in particular with this kind of beginnings of storytelling around race, gender, and class with a figure like Mary Jones. And so I wonder if you could talk about that leap in history, like that research arc that you followed and were like, okay, I'm going to stick the landing on. And then also what you found when you got there and how that became the inception point for the book.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like Black people, Black queer people, trans people, all of us have been here since the beginning of time. And I think that was the kind of seed that I was really returning back to. Is like, there is something here, we just have to find it. And I think even thinking about these, abolitionist newspapers that happened in like 1826, like, I was always imagining, like, well, who made these newspapers? What were the hands of the people that looked like making it? And you would imagine that oftentimes that these are probably Black artisans, Black craftsmen, especially if you think about like all the enslaved labor that had all of these hard skills to produce all the documents and newspapers and things for the rest of the world. So of course, when it became in these other moments where we're creating things for ourselves, that skill and ingenuity was used for us, which I find to just be really powerful and not something that we always think about.
We ignore it. Sorry, just to interrupt. Like actively, it is ignored from the rights of history that things
Literally.
require labor. And when you have a labor force that is stolen, these two things go together.
Period. And then you realize that your labor force is way more skilled than you are, right? And then, just like imagine it's really the amount of artisans and names and people that were making just beautiful things for themselves because they could, they had that was passed down through generations, sometimes traumatically or sometimes in a way that we want to extend skills to our, kids. But anyways, I think one of the main reasons why I found even Mary Jones and found out about Mary Jones was because one of my professors suggested that I look in these old newspapers for the first time the word gay appears. And I thought that was such a great assignment. I thought it was such a great use of like using the archives and trying to find that language. And of course, like as we all know, like gay started off like being like, merry and jolly and happy. And as like time progressed and the kind of the coining of that word shifts, definition of that word shifts, then really during this time period, gay would mean like a sex worker, someone who's really promiscuous. And I found this phrase, gay deceiver. And I was like, what are they talking about? Like, who's a gay deceiver? What is this article? And it was talking about Mary Jones. And now then having that name, Mary Jones, and I was able to look up other people's work around Mary Jones, other people's research around Mary Jones, like Tourmaline, who does amazing work and film work around Mary Jones. But this lithograph appeared in this research that was created in 1836 by this guy named H.R. Robinson. And it depicts this beautiful illustration of this Black woman in this beautiful dress covered in, flowers. And it's just gorgeous with her gloves on, looking so fashionable, but underneath the image, it says the man monster. And I loved seeing that image and understanding that contrasting language and the contrasting way that it made me feel, right? And also, I think it also speaks to how they even perceived her. Like looking at newspaper clippings written about Mary Jones, they would always describe her as being very fashionable, wearing the most stylish hat, dressed like head to toe. They loved her, but in the same breath, they would demonize her, villainize her, and talk about her body and talk about it, as being this kind of monster thing. And so I think, that tension is history. And I think that tension is why this story is really powerful, because I think there is a resiliency, obviously, in Mary Jones existing in the way she was and being brave in who she was and standing against these status quos that I think we can still learn from and build up on today.
No, it's interesting when I was, because I learned about Mary Jones first through Tourmaline's films. And I love kind of the cheeky nod that you make about her confrontations with the police. Because of course at the time, I mean, up until what, I want to say 70s, but don't quote me, this is a history museum. But the laws around cross-dressing and dressing across gender lines, them being this like really tough paradox for so many, because it has this way of prescribing like what is appropriate, and that these two articles of clothing could then put you in context of sex work or all of these other ways that people in our community are villainized, demonized, or discounted. But then there's this also kind of twist that you have there, thinking about like Mary as this protest figure, and utilizing graphic design and utilizing the press as a way to be able to make memory of herself. And then also simultaneously being underneath the thumb of capitalism and still having to do this work and do sex work and find herself in these precarious situations. So all of these kind of complications come together, but we don't know them to exist outside of print. We don't know them to exist if these histories had not been recorded. And it just like goes to nail again, like it is impossible to be remembered without these objects. Like design is so intrinsic as a tool to memory in ways that especially Black folks have just been so denied, because of course there were no, you know what I mean? There were none of us.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, and that's why I really wanted to frame the book in this way. I think, obviously, I'm a graphic designer and I love, print and I love books. I love this stuff. But at the same time, it's like proof, right? It's undeniable evidence. It is, like I gave a talk recently in my hometown in Columbus, Georgia, and back in the South, and my whole family was there. And they came up to me being like, we don't know this history. We just assume that, they're evolving in terms of their beliefs and their conservatism. But, I never imagined that queer people were in the 1800s. That was not something that they even thought of. There was like, this is something new that's just existing, in the 70s and the 80s. Like, this is not something that has been here. So I think it is like, yeah, that's why I love the artifacts, because, a group of people had to make it and then it still exists.
Yeah. And just to nail it home, because I'm so like, when I think about the things that I'm like hyper obsessed with, it's this exact intersection of like, we are so ingrained and you didn't exist. And we live under this administration that is actively stripping these tenets of how archival work has been built, right? To tell us that these groups don't exist and therefore they cannot be replicated. Therefore, they do not deserve rights. They do not deserve healthcare, autonomy,
They're
basic
not
human
human.
dignity and respect.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think about figures like Mary in context with like a Sojourner Truth, who also made postcards of herself very historically to be able to sell to support her abolition work. And she had these postcards that she made, which are in the Smithsonian collection, I'm sure, that talk about selling the shadow of herself, which is a photo, to support the substance of her work.
Mm,
Or you have someone like Frederick Douglass, who is
exactly.
the most photographed man in the 20th century, because he understands very intimately how important photography is to building memory and to storytelling. And we see that represented in the Dandyism exhibition that just opened at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and then that photograph becomes proof to people like this is what a free Black man looks like. This is who we are, you know. And I feel like, yeah, it can break misconceptions about people. It can transform people's minds when they can hold something in their hand and learn a new truth.
yeah.
Which
And we
truth,
have
obviously, right now is a hard thing, but we're figuring it out.
it's a slippery slope. We had a question from the Q&A early about who Mary Jones was. Do you want to just give us like a top line definition? I can
Top
also give
line
you.
definition: Mary Jones was a Black trans woman in New York City, born 1805. We don't know exactly when she died. She's known, she's kind of claim to fame as the first documented Black trans person in New York, which obviously isn't true. Like there was obviously other trans people, but she was really famous because there were so many news clippings and these lithographs about her because she was a petty theft, because she was a sex worker, because she stole money from kind of these rich white elites that probably were coming to her for her services. And then of course went to jail and all these different things. And I think one of the things that's really amazing is that when she goes to jail, there is a kind of, you know, police recording description of what she's saying, and you can hear her own voice. And she talks about, you know, living between being a man and a woman, and you know, when she was in the South of New Orleans, and how everyone's like, you look better this way. This is who you should be. This is who you are. And you know, and you understand that she has a community in her own words. So I feel like it's like she's a really powerful, interesting character.
One of the other things that I thought, which is a perfect segue to another character that we meet in your book, was an early conversation that you raised about how we only know Black graphic storytelling and Black graphic design, object making, in many ways through realms and conversations around protests. So when we think about historic, especially before the oh my God, now I'm blanking on the book, but there's a Black design anthology that also came out, the Orange Book, you know what I'm talking about?
The Orange Book.
You contributed to it.
Oh, this book.
Yes.
Black Experience
Yes.
in Design.
The
Yeah.
Black Experience in Design, another highly recommended book.
Right.
But it of course starts with Emory Douglas. And when we think of people in this lineage, we think of Emory Douglas, we of course think about the Black Panther newspaper, or we think about Fire, which also could be considered within a continuum of protest. And I was wondering for yourself, when you were thinking about assembling this book, and you write to it, of course, but if you could talk a little bit about trying to find a way to pay tribute and to acknowledge the need for protest work and what it means to exist in a world that would rather you be extinct, but then also how to tell a more abundant and comprehensive history of our existence.
Absolutely. I mean, exactly. I feel like in graphic design school, or when people was telling me like, these are like queer things or Black things you should know about, they always were tied to us fighting for freedom, always tied to our oppression. And they could be beautiful things, right? I mean, I think Black Panther newspaper is like a beautiful collection of design objects and photographs and collages and all of that. But we would like, you know, but the flip side of that is like in graphic design class, you're learning about people doing stuff for magazines because it's beautiful, about art. You learn about people doing logos. You learn about performers and musicians and how politicians, and you learn about all these other contexts that you can use graphic design in. And I wanted to explore what those other contexts were. I wanted to find those other pathways. And I think for me too, I think like the kind of untold part of this is like we all kind of know about the Black Panther, story in one way or the other. And I was like, well, what are these other stories that maybe we don't know about that obviously then still had to have some type of graphic design ephemera that was associated with it. And so then the book, then you start to see things like, you know, ads for shows or posters for concerts or exhibition catalogs that were created or, flyers for drag shows or, all of these different things that really show you the full human of who we are as people, not just rooted in this fight, which obviously is important, but we're more than that. We contain multitudes.
Speaking of more than that, it's a great place to talk about Alan Bell's role as a mentor and as a correspondent in the construction of this book, because this could have been a book that's a conversation with objects. Like it's very easy, especially as an academic, to commune with the dead and do necromancy. We do it, we see it, but it is very different when you're speaking directly to a living, breathing human being who put in the labor hours and then also is like excluded in many of these tellings. So you're doing a lot of emotional labor as well. And so I wonder if you could talk about Alan, and then also, yeah, like the surprising unsurprise of being able to encounter these documents that were waiting to be found.
Exactly. Yeah. So Alan Bell has a high level intro. He is this amazing, he just turned 80 in March, Black gay man that's living in LA, but he founded several magazines, but two critical objects. One is the Gays Week newspaper, which was founded in New York in 1977 to 1979. And it was really the first kind of serious weekly gays newspaper that talked about politics and culture and art in New York. And the other big publication that he did was BLK magazine that was based in LA. And that was basically like the Newsweek or the Village Voice for the Black queer community in the nation, but starting off as a resource for community members in LA. And that ran from 1988 to 1994. And they produced, one issue was 1 million copies of, BLK, and getting that to be brought around the world and sharing these really specific intersections and tributes of Black queer life. And so for me, when I first encountered Alan, because I found out about BLK and I was like, well, is the person who made this alive? Is this person around? And I was connected with him through one of my friends, Silas Monroe. And Alan at that time was doing these like Adobe classes online. So he like invited me to give like a workshop with his class about design and editorial design and book design. I think I showed Black Futures actually. Anyways, and so that kind of started our relationship because he was like curious. I was curious about him, but he was curious if I was like really serious about design and who I was. So basically we did a Zoom call over COVID and I asked him all of these questions about his life story. And that was like 5 years ago. And Alan have since become a really close, dear friend of mine. I think for me, was really one of the first kind of Black queer elder mentors that I ever had, like thinking about, I can count on one hand, like the number of Black queer people that I know over the age of 75 in general, perhaps. And so I think that was something that was really powerful to me, just to be connected with this intergenerational designer, but also the oral histories and stories that are literally nowhere else. Like he holds these histories in his heart. And these is like, and I think that's the exciting thing about talking to elders is like in the oral history aspect of this, that's critical. Like the objects can tell you so much. You can read an object, you can learn so much, but the people behind the objects, and if they're still with us, really are, the key to this. So I don't know, there's multiple modes of researching and digging in. So yeah, Alan's amazing. He's amazing, and he's made over, I don't know, 10 different magazines over the course of his working as a designer. He still works as designer to this day in LA and South Side of LA. Like he is like this rambunctious, amazing man. I got him invited to the typographics conference, which is a graphic design conference in New York at the end of the month. So he's gonna be here telling his story. Like, I just don't know, he's just like a rock star. I love him.
Love that. I wonder if you could talk about the context that Black exists in. So what role does a magazine like Black play in our history and in collective kind of publication history?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the major thing is like obviously it was the 80s and 90s when this was being created. Obviously, the internet didn't exist. And so mail became the lifeline for people to stay connected with each other. And especially as we all know with the HIV/AIDS pandemic crisis that was happening around everyone, you know, how do you get out information to the community members that need it the most? How do you have, you know, how do you find out who has passed away? Like one of the very first issues second issue talks about the obituary to Sylvester and this beautiful tribute to who they are. And they also had, you know, these amazing statistics about what was going on in the communities and the nation around the AIDS epidemic and where you could find resources and where you could find information. So some parts of it was, of course, like talking about why can't I think of the movie? Paris is Burning, and how it was so problematic that a white woman did it. But in the same breath, you know, talking about these critical needs of and news for the community. And I think one of the other things that's really powerful about it is that each magazine had a portrait or a picture of a Black person, typically a Black queer person. So if you receive this in the mail, it's like such a symbol of hope. It's such a symbol of you're not alone. It is a symbol. And then for us today, of course, it's like this amazing archive of opinions and stories and images and photographs that really were countering a lot of the kind of mainstream news that was happening. You know, a lot of space wasn't being given to talking about the intersections of Black and queer and HIV positive in, you know, the world.
I mean, it's just it couldn't be better time to be having a conversation such as this, because it's true when you have almost effectively no access to be able to speak to each other on a global level in the middle of a crisis.
Right.
There are these needs for ingenuity, and these publications exist at this intersection to provide us this mirror and this web and connection to each other. Are there other, well, I mean, I think our generation has echoed this very beautifully. And of course, you've taken a centrifugal role in this work. And I wonder if you could talk about, I mean, there's the immediate torch of the work that you've done already, but then I also want to ask you about like the way that it's continuing to support the work you're doing. But let's start with how, when you were thinking about the collective work that you're doing, the publication work that you were doing, could you speak to the urgencies around, especially like what you know before you knew what you know now?
Exactly. I mean, one of my very first design projects that I did when I graduated school was being connected with the 10th magazine. And I literally remember getting being on Facebook days, and seeing this ad that said queer or Black, gay, and unbothered, order today. And I was like, what is this? And it was like these beautiful images of all these like Black men hugging each other. It was like so sexy. So I ordered it, of course, and then I got it in the mail, and literally I was flipping through this magazine, and every single page I could feel like a teardrop. Like, and then I was sobbing by the time I got to the middle of the magazine, and I had to close it. And I immediately figured out a way to contact them and say, hey, I'm Jon. I just moved to New York. I'm a graphic designer. I need to work with you guys. Like, I need this type of community. And so I still work with the 10th magazine team on different projects, but I was the designer art director for the 10th magazine for like 6 or 7 years. And really the 10th magazine's whole function and purpose was showcasing that the Black queer experience was not a monolith, and to create a publication that was for and by Black queer people. So they had topics that talked about the intersection of Black queer people and technology, talking about romanticism in the past, talking about how we need leisure and joy in our lives, and looking at it through a critical lens of history, of opinion pieces, of fashion editorial, of illustrations. And when I first started working with them, it was like, wow, like now I'm completely surrounded by this new community of Black queer creatives that they said didn't exist. They were certainly not people that I saw in my classrooms at RISD. And that was really inspiring for me. And it really reminded me, or that allowed me to realize that one, there is we are capable of creating whatever we want to create. There are so many of us that are so talented. And then that also kind of sparked that kind of question, like what came before the 10th magazine? I think this question of this obsession of what came before, speaking of things I'm obsessed with, um, it's all matching this kind of urgency. And I think, yeah, I mean, my day job at that time was working corporate at great advertising, doing, you know, Red Lobster ads and doing Olive Garden ads. So to have an outlet after work that I can spend all of my passions with designers and refine my skills with people that understood my experiences and speaking to an audience that I wanted, it was just amazing. And so I feel like to me that was really pivotal because I think that one allowed me to like focus on this editorial work that I love, build this Black queer community and network of amazing people that I will continue to work with for the rest of my life, and also realize that maybe I can exist in this world as this Black queer designer. Maybe there are outlets for me. And then I met you like right after that, like when I was working on the 10th magazine, I met you and we did Black Futures. It was like, again, each of these projects kind of allowed me to realize that there is space for me to exist in this world. And I can do all kinds of projects, but the ones that were most important to me were the ones where I get to archive, amplify, work together with people that, that I love.
No, I think that that's another one of the things that we share very intimately is like, and something that I think is important for people to hold in their back pocket is that, of course we are all working within these constraints. We are all working in relationship to institutions, even freelancers. People are like, you don't have a boss. I'm like, actually, as a freelancer, I have several bosses. I have several bosses all the time. But I think to be able to keep up with demand as creatives is to be able to find these projects and these paths of passion. Because if you are not speaking to something that's bigger than a deadline, you will burn out and you will not be able to have that pivotal role in collective storytelling or history. Like these projects, especially even like reading what you were writing about Gays Week or writing about Black, and like people like hand
Pasting.
pasting to create, like,
And
we
got
have
paid
this.
nothing. They were all volunteers, 100 volunteers coming in because this work was important. This work needed to happen. And similarly with the 10th magazine, very few people got paid for that. I mean, unfortunately, like we wanted ads, we wanted this stuff, and it was really difficult. But I think regardless, all of us felt like this was a rare opportunity for us to come together and to make something this beautiful. And I feel like that is the thing that motivates, I mean, that's a consistent thread through time, like people coming together and just making something because it has to be made.
Right. And I think it's just in most simple terms, we want to be paid, effectively. There should be more resource for these magazines and publications to be created so that the staff can be paid well, so that they can be archived well, so that there can be multiple Schomburgs and multiple one archives, and these things don't have to be gate kept within an inch of their lives. But then also at the same time, it's important, and I tell my mentees this all the time, to continue to sharpen your oyster knife. So it is important to take on these projects, to listen to these calls, because it will help you to define also your own imprint, your own style. Like, I think one of the other things that's really elegant in the book is that you show so many different skills, eras, shapes that people were trying. Not everything in the book is beautifully made. Not everything in the book is sleek, but you
Exactly.
see this diversity in making. And I think that's something that I also want to drive through, and maybe if there's other, especially as an educator, because I can't imagine, like, and only an educator could make this. And at the same time, it's cool being another like nerd reading it. And so I wonder, for yourself, like, especially, yeah, because it's crazy that you pulled this together in under 5 years, because
I
I'm sure
know.
like trying to get back on task. So I guess my last question for you, because we're gonna hand over to Q&A as well. Organizing principles.
Mm.
Because when you are really passionate about everything and you very quickly can fall in love with a bunch of different things, and this needs to be included, and this needs to be included, and this needs to be included, how do you whittle down, especially because you're not just including these things, like Black Futures, we included things. What you've taken here is also added in anecdotes and historical context. How then do you divvy your labor and your brain power? What stays, what goes? How do you construct this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my editor, Nick Thomas at Living Credo, as we're working on the project, he was like, John, don't feel any pressure putting anything in the book that you don't love. Like every single thing in this book should be objects that you love. And there was a lot of things that I like was thinking about. Like there was like, the beefcake porno magazines and all of these other things, which really I was looking through the materials and like all of it was just so like derogatory and bad. I was like, I don't want to include that. It didn't make me feel good. Like it was like, and it wasn't like a lot of great examples that I really wanted to highlight. I mean, there were so many other things, but I think one of the kind of organizing principles for me was I knew I wanted to be linear. Like I knew I wanted to have it divided by these decades in time. I knew I wanted to have key figures, like people that I was highlighting in each of the chapters, but I also knew that I wanted to have um like breakout sessions to kind of think about objects as like their own. So there's like a lot of the gray pages are like these one-off objects where I just write 200 words about this one object. So I really knew I had a collection of just objects that I wanted to feature in a way that wasn't, a 3,000 word essay, So, and yeah, and I guess another organizing principle was um, trying to have a diversity of objects. Like I really wanted to have, like there's a lot of newspaper clippings at the beginning of the book. And so I really wanted to have, where are the things where I can get more visual? Where are the image covers? Where are the lithographs? Where are the paintings? Where are the posters? Like where are the illustrators? And also I was thinking a lot about gender in the book. Like how can I have a really nice representation of everyone? I don't know. I think for me, like I really kept a lot of stuff in the book. Like, like I think to my publisher's dismay, I think they were like at some point there's like, John, no more pages. It's like 450. We have to stop. Like we can't go any further. But I really appreciated that. And also I think the main thing that I just want to say about it is like, this is just the beginning. This is one history that I've put together from my perspective based off my interests. There's so many, like somebody else can make this exact same book and have completely different objects, have completely different takes, like have a completely different relationship to the stories. And I think that's why it's important for all of us to be engage with archiving, engage with keeping our own materials and stories. Keep your friends poster, keep your friends program of the show. Like keep that, postcard that's really beautiful that makes you smile. I think all of these things give us context to who we are as people, how do we live as humans, who we were on this earth. And those things have value.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of mastery and how mastery in its like form of itself requires an audience, requires a collective, because we're all kind of pushing each other to this kind of
Next
idealized,
one.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? It's like we're all encouraging each other to step our respective games up. And I feel like that's what makes Black Queer and Untold such an incredible offering, because it's like there's all of these rhizomatic experiences that you've been able to compel, take seriously, and put together um, with just such love and care and attention. It's really beautiful what you've done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I'm just, yeah. I'm still like surprised when I go out and see it in bookstores and when people send me pictures of it, or people are now like really reading it and engaging with it. And, we've gotten some nice, cute press and stuff. Like, it's just incredible. Like, this is out in the world. And, it's definitely foundational to a bunch of other, projects and things that I'm working on now.
Yeah. No, it's always interesting. Like, I remember one of the first times that I saw Black Futures, like at a friend's house. Cause also too, so like my book came out in December 2020 when we were at this place in the world where we're like, I'm never gonna be in rooms with people again. And so being able to, yeah, to see the book used in the world is always really huge. And I feel like it was also, to just circle back to those early meetings, like one of the things I was really passionate about was making sure that it was a book that got design awards. I don't know what I was on. Like, I wish Jay was here just to be like, this human being was on one. I was like, it has to be a book. It can't be a zine. It has to win awards. It has to be designed perfectly. But it like, I can't say enough how cool it is to see, your time and attention paid to a project of your own as well. Because it is very vibrant. There's so many images that you were able to get the rights to use.
I know. I mean, there's so many. That's the thing that was not. I mean, there's so many images that I could not get the rights to, like amazing album covers, amazing things from like Jet and Ebony and all this stuff. And that is the thing that I was a little bit sad about. And like now I put those things when I do like lectures and stuff. I make sure I include those images. But yeah.
No, it's funny because it's like, this ain't Instagram, this ain't Tumblr. You can't just be
Yes.
throwing, like, you really have to go through crazy systems of approval.
Yeah.
So yeah, to get it to this volume of information, and that you designed it in a way, I wish I could like, I should have done a better job to have scans, but you were able to really effectively use the pages to be able to fit in as much information as possible, like even in the way that like text is included next to imagery, and like these flows of things where you're like, okay, but don't forget, like I can almost like hear your brain and hand very elegantly at work to make sure that stones didn't go unturned.
Yes.
And so I think maybe my last question I want to ask of you, there were so many questions that you posed throughout the book. Like when you're reading, I don't know if you know this about yourself, but you love questions. Like you put
Yes.
questions right into the middle of so many of your paragraphs. And I wonder for you what some of the questions are that you're asking yourself now that the book is finished. And what questions do you hope people walk away from this book having answered or resetting as new questions for themselves?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the big question that I'm asking right now in my mind is what is it to be Black, queer, and elder? And I'm working on like my next big project that's like actually happening is I'm working on a documentary. I'm shooting a documentary that is kind of centering Alan Bell and his life and his collaborators, but also other kind of Black queer elders and us having like this intergenerational friendship and dialogue around like life and resiliency and what should the kids be thinking about? What are the things that you regret? What are the things that that we should be taking away from, the wisdom and pearls that you've had on this earth? And I think, I'm always asking, every single day I find out about a new Black queer thing that I didn't know about that's not in this book. And I find that to be really inspiring and kind of always searching for, more gaps to fill and figuring out more names that I didn't know and then trying to figure out ways to present stories to people in ways that I haven't done before, which is film. I've never done anything with film. So yeah.
It's a perfect pivot.
Yeah.
I see it for you. I see it for you. Also too, because it makes it a little bit more living, breathing than I think that books can afford us, which is tough with books. I love that. Oh, I love that. And I also think too, like, and this is my own personal insistence as like adjacent to an academic for now anyway, is like, you have to start with what happened. I don't know what happened in my soapbox is like, everybody is not like, we are no cooler than the people who came before us. I just have to say, like, I'm like, I cannot say enough. I'm like, we are not cooler than the people who came before us. We will not be cool if we do not afford the room and respect and regard for those who became before us, because how can we expect any respect if we do not give it first?
Absolutely. Like literally. Like
everybody want to be the creative director, artistic director, the leader of, the CEO of, but we come in these incredible lineages. And so it's very beautiful to be in community with someone else who understands, especially true, like being the generation that is continuing to live alongside the AIDS epidemic, but of course is a generation off from its inception point. And so what it means for us to be in community with people like Alan, or like for myself, Brian Keith Jackson, who I love very much, or Tom Healy,
I love him.
Like having especially, like Black gay elders is such a tremendous privilege.
It is. It's a blessing. It's a gift. I feel lucky. Like, it's not something that I take for granted, and I think that's the whole point of all of this is like you're saying, like we have to respect our elders, we have to respect our past, we have to know where we come from. And like these people back in the day were so cool. Like, you know, they were cool, they were really bold and brave, and they were living in different times than we were living in. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I don't need to go back any day in time, not even an hour, but it is amazing to know, you know, what we're building upon.
And so on that note, we have a question from our audience.
Ooh.
That is a question about your because you raised Black Beefcake magazine
Yeah.
as one that you came across in your research, but it felt difficult to include in context of this book. And I wonder if you could talk about that. I mean, I have my own thoughts on that too, but I'd be curious from your standpoint, how you were delineating, especially within like the kink kind of continuum, what made sense for inclusion.
Yeah, I think one there, I mean, I just learned about kind of more like a 80s kind of Black beefcake magazine that was like a Black people made it magazine, but really everything else was very like, this is made from the white gaze. Like all of this is made from white men who are just fetishizing the experiences and bodies of Black queer folks. And it is so limited in their imagination of how, you know, we could be presented. And there is nudity in the book in Black Queer Untold, but there's not like, because I think, like for example, Alan did do some kind of sexy, porny magazines that he was in control over, but the whole gaze of that magazine is so different. It's really about the beauty, the physique, the stories, who the person is. There's literally interviews and writings. Like he wanted to be like the Black queer playboy, you know, and have you know, essays. So I think for me, it was just like, is this work that is like just perpetuating stereotypes and perpetuating a white imagination? And the answer really was yes. I like just did not find enough examples, if maybe one, maybe not, that I just felt like, okay, this is worth putting in. This is something that feels inspiring. This feels like something like this person is having agency. Not until we get to like the 80s and 90s with Alan and some of those people, like Booty Vox and those guys. But really like, yes, Black Fire. It's a very sexy magazine. Um, yeah, because really like the beefcake whole thing is really like a 1950s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s kind of language anyways. And so you could imagine why it was so problematic.
I got this one. It's my favorite plate in the whole book.
Yes, Booty Vox. And I love that, like this amazing illustration that's blending like the Black Panther, you know, party and blending this kink and this fetishism and like condensing Black and queerness and sexuality and freedom in one image. Like that's a really powerful image. You know, that's really like, I don't know, it makes you think about a lot of different facets of who we are as people and what do we get to actually, how do we get to own who we are?
No, and it's very that where it's like people are like, you're perverted, and we're like, yes.
Yes. Exclamation point.
Well, yes. Oh my gosh, no, I love it. I mean, I think it is it's such a delicate dance when you're like, okay, how do we remember? I mean, it makes me think about, of course, there's an artist named Robert Mapplethorpe who people may be
Exactly.
familiar with, a white gay photographer of the 80s, 90s, who famously made this work called The Black Book. And it's a series of photographs that included images of Black sex workers and Black sexual partners. But it's very much just like from the waist down, or like kind of dismembered body parts. And Glenn Ligon famously made a work in response to it called Notes from the Black Book, which I highly recommend looking at. But it is this kind of tension point in queer storytelling, and specifically the male gaze. Y'all take that one. Of just being like, okay, how do we find room for pleasure principles, kink, even like if you want to be denigrated, but room
Right.
for agency in those
Exactly.
storytelling is quite a labyrinth, a lavender labyrinth, if you will.
Yes, and I think, as a person, as an author, as a writer, I think it's our responsibility to kind of create the kind of safe havens in our books that we want to create and create the realities that we really want to this work to be associated with. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Do we have any more questions? This is our last call. No more? Okay, well, thank all of you for tuning in, and for anybody who's watching this post-recorded, many, many congratulations to Jon Key, author of Black, Queer, and Untold, a new archive of designers, artists, and trailblazers. It is an incredible book. I'm so happy to own it, and very, very thankful to know you and to see, I know firsthand how much work a book like this takes. And
Exactly.
it's very cool to have it. It was so cool to walk into a bookstore and get it. Like, please go support this book. You cannot get it on an audiobook. You have to get it physically, or you will miss out on these incredible plates.
Also, but my twin Jared did record the audio book version, which is really fun. And
Oh, really? Well,
yeah,
you'll need both.
so
Hot
you
take.
need both. You need to hear them and just flip through the book. But thank you so much, Kimberly. This was so fantastic. You know, I love you and I love all the work you're doing, and you continue to inspire us all to make space for Black art and work and excellence and love and community.
And that's it. Just the little things.
Just the bare minimum.
Just a little bit. But yes, we are now finished. Thank you so much to the teams who worked to make this happen.
Yes, thank you
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us for this special World Pride edition of the Lavender Literary Society. Thank you to Jon and Kimberly. This was so beautiful. Thank you for uplifting lineage, legacy, and the archive. And if you haven't yet, please grab a copy of Jon's book, Black, Queer, and Untold, from our partners Rep Club in LA,
Oh,
who
love that.
offer a 10% discount code for all Lavender Literary Society members. So go over to Rep Club, use code Lavender10 at checkout. We're going to add that link to the chat. And please grab a copy of Jon's book. The next edition of the Lavender Literary Society Book Club takes place on June 3rd in person in Brooklyn, New York, and will feature Carol DeRobertis' new book, So Many Stars, An Oral History of Trans, Non-Binary, Genderqueer, and Two-Spirit People of Color. Carol will be in conversation with Jacqueline Woodson, renowned author and 2020 MacArthur Fellow. Also put a link to the chat so you can join us if you're in New York on June 3rd. On June 7th, we invite all LGBTQ plus gallery, library, archive, and museum workers to join us as we march in the World Pride Parade in Washington, D.C. Please RSVP via the link in the chat. And lastly, on June 13th, we invite you to two programs taking place in New York City. One is Blueprints of Resistance, Lessons from LGBTQ plus Activism, Past, Present, and Future, which will take place at the New York Historical. And the second is Pride Night at the American Museum of Natural History, where we're presenting a program called The Evolution of Sapphosora, also in the chat. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to allow our colleague Gloria to close out for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jon and Kimberly. This was such a delightful evening, just a really wonderful conversation. Feel very inspired and really excited to revisit the book again. If you are in DC, please join the Smithsonian American Art Museum tomorrow for special Pride Gallery talks. One at 2:30 and one at 5:30. That's tomorrow, May 27th. And if you're there on the weekend, we have our Pride Family Festival on Saturday, May 31st from 11:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can check out the SAM events page for information about all of these programs and a few other things we have going on for Pride. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to the American LGBTQ Plus Museum for allowing SAM to join in this fantastic edition of the Lavender Literary Society. And we look forward to welcoming you to upcoming programs at SAM and the American LGBTQ Plus Museum. Good night, everyone.
Bye.